Next week, the Department of Environmental Conservation will hold the first 2 of 4 public hearings looking at the controversial natural gas drilling technique that is known as hydrofracking. My next guest spent 30 years working in the oil and gas industry, and now he's become one of the most outspoken critics of New York's plans to legalize high-volume horizontal hydraulic fracturing. That's a mouthful. He is James Northrup. He goes by Chip. It is nice to meet you. Thank you very much for being here.
Good to be here.
Right, I just can't get over this particular wording in something that you wrote in 2010. Hydrofracking of shale strata is not dissimilar from exploding a bomb underground.
Did I say that?
You did.
Well, yeah. When they were trying to figure out how to frack shale, they tried just about everything. And one of the things that they tried, and famously in Rulis in Colorado, was they exploded a nuclear bomb in the shale.
Did it work?
It did work, sort of. It made a big hole in the shale. Unfortunately, the gas was radioactive, so they couldn't sell it.
Yeah, it brings environmental disaster to a whole new level.
Yeah, so New York should be grateful that it didn't work.
This is actually interesting. I know some people probably who are watching, who are attuned to this issue, have probably seen you before, I'm sure. What's the gas industry's reaction to you?
Oh, I don't, well, I think I've had some sort of official rebuttals from Chesapeake, but they get in the papers down in Texas and in Oklahoma. I haven't seen them around here. I know that the newspapers down in Oklahoma and Chesapeake have come out with presentations and white papers that counter what I have to say.
But in other words, they counter what you've said, but they don't try and discount you as, I mean, you've got 30 years behind you, so you know of what you speak, obviously.
Well, yeah, and frankly, what their problem is that I'm basically saying things that they know as well or better than I do. I just say them and they don't.
There have been a couple of areas that you focused on. One of the ones that I think people are overlooking, there's been some talk of it, but largely overlooked because it's so significant, is the truck traffic. We'll get to the actual science of the drilling itself, but I think it looks like New York is going along the lines of saying yes to this process. Yeah. It looks that way, although it's been delayed. The truck traffic, though, you put together this slideshow that just is going to scare the living daylights out of people. You are talking about 24-hour trucking?
Yeah, well,
is that what you're saying?
When you drill a well, you do it 24 hours a day. You don't stop. So the trucks going into a well site to drill it are going to be going there 24 hours a day.
And what does that sound like?
Well, if you wouldn't want to know, because I mean these are basically big diesel gen sets, a lot of diesel engines on the site, the trucks on the site. You wouldn't want to be anywhere near it when it's going on.
But you have a place in Cooperstown. It's a small and rather quaint municipality. I mean, trucks coming in and out, regardless of the noise that it causes and the air pollution, do you think that the roads are capable of handling that?
The roads might be capable of handling it for a while, but it is a textbook way of tearing a road up, and it certainly it would be a great way to ruin a small village like that.
And also would create, I mean, we're talking about noise pollution, we're talking about air pollution, we're talking about traffic, we're talking about infrastructure issues, I mean, all of this stuff, and that's just one small subset of what drilling might bring to a community.
Right. And frankly, that's one thing the industry doesn't talk about. I mean, they know it takes 1,000 trucks just to frack one lateral, to drill and frack one well. On a well pad site, they could have 20 of those.
What, one well takes 1,000 trucks?
Yeah, so one well, so 20 laterals on a well pad. So you're looking at 20,000 trips. And if you live on the road.
In a year?
Well, in a matter of months. For 20 wells, over a period of a couple of years, actually. But that's, so you're looking at 40,000 drive-bys a year.
And there's no other way, right?
No,
I mean, there's no other way to
not.
transport it, unless you build a pipeline.
Well, even if you build a pipeline, you still have to get the drill pipe there and the drilling mud and whatnot. It takes a lot of trucks, and it will certainly ruin the neighborhood. Okay,
so that obviously, and it can't be mitigated. I mean, you could say only at night they roll, or only on alternate Tuesdays, or only.
And the other, they have to drive fast. They're always in a hurry to get there, to get the frac fluid out of there. So they're generally 10 to speed. And there's no way around it.
All right.
And so they don't talk about it.
Okay, so that's the one piece that we haven't. We've talked a lot about the science, quote unquote, which you don't believe that this document that we've seen so far is actually based on true science?
The SGICE, the DEC's proposed regulations, is basically a political document.
What does that mean?
Well, what it means is that they set the setbacks, they set the regulations based on the number of people that are affected. So for instance, New York City has got great regulations, and if you're a farmer with one well, you have very few protections. So in other words, it's a function of population density. A lot of people get protected, few people don't get protected.
Okay, so that's one aspect. What is there something else in particular that makes it political? That's a setback.
Well,
issue.
yeah, the other aspect of it is basically the DEC's reliance on the industry for their quote-unquote science, which in fact is not particularly scientific. For instance would be the DEC proposes a third well casing for going forward. Well, the science knows, the science says that third well casing, additional well casings, is not going to prevent methane from coming up out of the ground.
Well, it would delay it.
It takes a while. It takes years, actually, in some cases, for it to get there. But basically, the gas comes up on the outside of the outermost casing. So if you put 3 or 5 or however many casings, the gas can still come up on the outside of the casing.
If the well was no longer active, would it continue to leak in that way?
Yeah, and actually, the New York State has got literally tens of thousands of abandoned oil wells and gas wells, and they will continue to leak.
Yeah, and actually they're incredibly delayed in removing them, which they were supposed to.
They're behind.
Doing. Yeah,
they're behind. They're several thousand wells behind.
But yet they're talking already about drilling new ones. So they haven't managed to take out the old ones that they were supposed to remove. You and I were talking a little bit before this interview started, and I'm just going to reiterate this question. Do you believe that horizontal drilling can be done safely in New York?
The way it's proposed, I don't think it can be. It's certainly not the way the regulations have been set up by the DEC, given the hydrology, the topography of the state. I don't think you can do it safely here.
Because of the density here?
Because of the population density, for one thing, because of the shallowness of the groundwater, the dependency on groundwater for drinking water wells, and frankly, the laxity in what the DEC proposes as regulations.
Okay, but if they put forward more stringent regulations, then it would improve the situation, no?
It's possible, but they're so far from it that I'm skeptical. I mean, in other words, the distance between where they are now and what they would have to do is substantial.
But what about the economic benefit that they've suggested would be coming?
The economics have been royally overstated by the DEC. The DEC published their socioeconomic study about the same time, or a little bit before the USGS revised their gas reserves. The USGS cut the gas reserves for the Marcellus by 80%. That's not reflected in the DEC's report. So the DEC's report is basically 5 times overstated.
Is it also possible that, some of these wells would be drilled and that some of the wells would not be as active or produce as much as expected, in which case then we would be stuck with?
Yeah, the other thing that the DEC didn't look at is that it is not economic to drill horizontal Marcellus gas wells at this time. Not at these gas prices, not at projected gas prices. They are not economic. So frankly, there's no rush for the DEC to issue rules on wells that probably won't get drilled at these current prices.
Well, the industry has suggested that if they keep putting regulations upon regulations upon regulations, they'll just go somewhere else. I mean, there is natural gas to be drilled elsewhere than New York, obviously.
Yeah, the regulations in New York are actually a lot less than they are in other states. For instance, the setback in New York from a house is 100 feet. Out west in Texas, that would be more like 1,000 feet. The setback from a pond in New York is 0. There's no setback of a gas well from, say, a private pond. In places in New Mexico, it's 750 feet. So the fact is, the regulations out west, the taxes, are much more stringent. They're much higher than what is here in New York, or even than what the DEC proposes.
Even what this document that came out over the weekend with this idea that you would actually be taxing the industry quite substantially. I mean, to create $7 million in the first year, up to more than 150, I think, $1 million eventually.
Yeah, the New York is one of the few places on the planet that does not tax gas at the wellhead. That's really, from a public policy standpoint, that's just disgraceful. In other words, gas production is tax exempt in New York, and that's not the case in any other state other than Pennsylvania. In every other state, it's taxed at the wellhead. 7.5% in Texas, up to 15% in Alaska. It's 0 in New York. That means New York State gets no direct revenue from gas production.
Unfortunately, we can't devote the whole show to this, but we will have you back because there are a lot of issues to talk about. Unfortunately, I do want to ask you this question. You have a place in the Cooperstown area, correct? In
right.
Cooperstown.
Yeah.
There's been the Otsego County Board of Supervisors races have been looked upon as sort of a referendum, if you will, on hydrofracking. I mean, do you believe that if this slate of candidates manages to, will they manage to eke out a victory? And if they do, what does that mean for hydrofracking in New York? Or is it just all politics is local,
right.
go away?
I think I think they'll win. I think most of them are going to win. I think what it'll mean is, and the sewer bill is sort of advances this, is that people are going to take control of this at the local level. Mm-hmm. That is the way it is in other states. Local zoning controls gas wells in Texas, New Mexico, Colorado, California, Oklahoma. That's the way it should be in New York. That's the way it's going to be.
But it's the Board of Representatives, pardon me. But doesn't that lead us to litigation from here to eternity?
I think the litigation can be stopped if New York conforms its laws to the way gas wells are treated in other states. That means home rule applies. So it could be solved very quickly in the next legislature.
Well, this is pretty fascinating stuff. I want to thank you very much, Chip Northrup, for being with us, and I hope you'll come back.
Thanks, Liz.
Appreciate it.